I'm happy to do it too.
We're back in a smart classroom.
Well, I guess we'll start.
Go for it.
I want to thank Macy and WCTV8 for continuing the terrific work that we're really so happy to be able to take advantage of, recording things left and right that are of interest and necessary for us. Something finally on TV that's good to watch, and online on demand, which is really good to take advantage of. There's lots of great stuff to see. And thank you everybody for coming by, and Quincy for making this stop and reporting back. And I was thinking about what to say here, and I remember 3 years ago, 4 years ago, Joel Covell, one of the founders of the Eco-Socialist Horizons, gave a talk here. I remember it was a really beautiful day, and I was looking out the window at what kind of day it was, and it was one of those things where you just like take your breath away, and then we're going to come inside and we're going to talk about destruction of the environment. And it's the same. I was skiing yesterday, and I had the same sort of feeling that. So it's not always our immediate senses, but our ability to reason that's really helpful for us as humans to look beyond the immediate beauty, but to also recognize the immediate beauty and not let it go. And I think this group of the Eco-Socialist Horizons, one of the things that is moving, I think, in this group is that they don't do, or at least the organization and some of the people, they use phrases like the cry of Mother Earth. And you think, is that just some poetic thing that somebody says, or can you hear it? Is there a cry? And I was thinking about that. Is there a, there's a story about Gotama Siddhartha sitting under a tree and hearing, he hears a wailing cry of the earth, and he puts his hand on the earth to establish a better connection. And he hears this cry, and it's sort of a cry that calls him to not want to abandon the earth, not to get lost in a state of religious or aesthetic rest, but to express his compassion. So I think that's a good connection. And the other phrase that I really like that they have been using is reweaving Pangea. And I think that's I don't know who thought of that, if that you came up with that one, but it's a great way to imagine the work, some of the work that needs to be done. And reweaving Pangea sounds a lot better to me than you want to support the Democratic Party, or do you want to support or which of the Democratic candidates, or what do you think about the two-party system? And so I really love the outside the normal set of choices that eco-socialism is talking about. And I guess one more thing I wanted to say, one talk Quincy gave here a long time ago, the theme was economic disaster or economic success, and what are you root for? And if you have if the GNP of the major nation states keeps rising, who's happy, and which species will die fastest because of that? So it's a real. So who are we rooting for, and why, and what are we what are we going to do about that possibly? And it's I guess that's pretty much all I want to say. Quincy has a talk that he's going to give in Sri Lanka within 2 weeks. And the title of the talk is Earth Destruction or Option.
What's the first
And
word of that?
sorry,
Did you say that again?
Earth Destruction or Option. And so I like that. It's a good way to frame things too. So I want to, without further ado, there's going to be some films that'll talk. There'll be some hip hop in Swahili. There'll be films taken in Bolivia, and well, Quincy will tell you all about it as it goes on. But it's a great mix of things, and I'm happy to be able to see it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, Dad. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much, everybody. It's really flattering to have people turn out with less than 24-hour notice to an event like this. So I'm sure you all came for your own individual reasons, and people tuning in, hope you stick around to the end. I'm going to take you on a journey with 5 films, and I'll introduce the films as they go. But I wanted to sort of let you know what the program's going to look like in advance. So this whole thing starts in around 2016, and it goes through 2018. And we're going to go from Venezuela to Tanzania to Bolivia, to Mississippi and to Bolivia. So what do these places have in common? That's the thread we're going to try to weave together this evening. And you'll see me in smaller, larger parts in these videos. But it's not about me. Really, this is about, I want to invite you all to accompany me on this journey that I've been on over the last 3 or 4 years, in which I've found incredible hope, inspiration, and even faith in the human spirit. And I think it's very important to transmit this, because I go to places around the world and get filled with this energy and come back to the affluent global north and find myself really shocked and appalled on some level at the prevailing cynicism that I encounter among people that live in this part of the world. If you really push people on these issues, this response I usually get is, oh, well, humans are just going to die out. We should just go anyway. We're destroying everything. The sooner the better. And I actually kind of hear this quite a lot. There's a saying, people find it more difficult to imagine the end of capitalism than to imagine the end of the whole world. We sort of can see this massive cataclysm, but we can't imagine a reorganization of our society in very obvious ways to meet people's needs and nature's needs. So the program's going to start in Venezuela in 2016. About 40 people got together. And let me just say this first. Starts in Venezuela. We've been hearing about Venezuela in the news a lot lately. And I think this is another perfect case of what Malcolm X said, which is you ought to be really careful about reading the newspapers, because they'll have you loving the people who are doing the oppressing and hating the people who are being oppressed. And I guess the most important thing to say is that Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world. And over the past 2 decades, that oil wealth has gone towards health, education, things like health and education and housing. And the powers that be aren't very happy with that. They lost a lot of money on that, and they want to get it back. And that's what we're seeing right now, as about half the countries in the world decide they don't believe in democracy now and just recognize this guy who declares himself president and hand over the keys to bank accounts worth billions of dollars in the U.S. And the first people who are going to suffer, actually, are people in the United States, because Venezuela for years has been subsidizing heating oil for low-income families in places like Burlington. All those accounts have been frozen, and we're going to stop seeing that aid. So look, if you want to know what international solidarity looks like, I recommend look into what's happening in Haiti in the last couple weeks. I'm just going to leave that as a little teaser. Go home and look up what's happening in Haiti in relation to Venezuela. There's thousands of people in the streets, and I wish we could see something like that in this part of the world. So now I'll back up because you're going to be seeing some images of Venezuela here that look nothing like what you've seen on the news. In 2016, about 40 people from about 10 countries and 4 continents got together and wrote a document. We were there for about 4 days. We discussed, we debated, and the title of this document was called The Cry of Mother Earth. This document served as a convocation. We said we met with 40 people for 4 days, but we want to bring together even more people from larger parts of the world to make a plan of action for humanity to rescue us from this crisis that we're in. In that in-between years, from 2016 to 2017, this document, The Cry of Mother Earth, was circulated around the world. And one of the places that it was circulated is in Tanzania. So the first video that we're going to see was produced outside Arusha, Tanzania, by a woman named Charlotte Hill O'Neill, otherwise known as Mama C. And the first words that you'll hear in this video come from this document, which I can hand out later, called The Cry of Mother Earth. And in this video, it's a hip-hop video, you will hear there's 4 languages, English, Spanish, Swahili, and Maasai. So you won't understand all the words, but I think that's good for our brains sometimes to hear things that we don't already understand. And if it leaves you with questions, I promise that as the videos progress, we're going to fill in a lot of the gaps. So without further ado, the cry of Mother Earth.
Ancestors who with their lives and struggles plowed the spirit and the strength of what we now call eco-socialism.
Masimulize yake story zimetukata mori, kufungwa kwa minyororo eti ndo mwanzo wa safari ya my story. Sio story, ni story za ukoloni zinazonipicha mimi, zinazonificha chini nisiamini ule uwezo na ujuzi kabla karne 20. Mama kushi simthamini, asili kasukumwa nyuma kwa siri shuleni, mazingira yaliyozinga nikisanga kuyapinga. Nani atatukinga, atatuchunga? Tumetusi wakunga kwa kubuya na kudunga, mifumo imetufunga na huu moja umetutenga. Kama karata mezani inabidi upya kujichanga. Afrika to diaspora, turudi mezani kuja panga, kabla ya huyu kipanga kuja kupita na vifaranga.
Tutunze mazingira, tusijepata sara ukataji miti mara kwa mara, sababu ni biashara. Tutumie zetu fikra na tufanye ya busara kwa wale taira sababishi wa ufukara. Mwangani tatendeka, uhalifu kuepuka, ujangili waongezeka, wanyama watuondoka. Miaka mbele ikifika, wanyama watatutoka. Kipi kitafanyika janga hili kulepuka? Janga hili kulepuka.
We weave ourselves to life and to Mother Earth. We are connected. We are one.
Africa Eloy Silai, Eloy Silai, Aroningo nanu Eloy Silai, Olosho Eloy Silai, Eloy Silai, Africa Eloy Silai, Olosho Eloy Silai, Dadola Jijik Eloy Silai, Africa Eloy Silai, Africa Tarona Olosho, Aibongara Bokin, Maronyor inkihwa, Maronyor pookin.
Upendo wa mbingu na ardhi tunauomba uendelee, mazao na mimea ili isitokome. Karimu wako Mwenyezi Mungu litutaka tukutegemee, watu wote na vitu vyote kila kitu kikunyoshe. Imani na thawabu zetu kwako utuongoze, hekima na huzima, fikra za umaskini wa dhambi na utumwa wa akili utukombolee. Rutuba ya mashamba duniani haswa Afrika utugombee, maana watu tunauona kugombea urithi utusamee. Kwa yote tunaoyafanya bila kujua utuepushie, wazee wa zamani walidumu mashambani kwa mbegu za kuhifadhi, sio kwa mbegu za madukani. Tujali uwasili tu kwa muwe maishani, kama tusishindane na Mungu kwani miujiza yake inashuhudika hadharani. Yeah.
It is up to us, we knowers, to carry the seeds that sprout resistance to oppression in our cultures and our traditions. We are the seeds that sprout food and water justice, social justice, environmental justice, community empowerment, and international solidarity. Tuco Pamoja, estamos conectados, somos uno. Let's make her smile.
And read over the document with her community, and then all those raps that we heard were written based on this document, The Cry of Mother Earth. So now we're going to fast forward a year. So this document was made. This video was made as a convocation to invite people to Venezuela the following year for what was called the Convocation of the First Eco-Socialist International. There were 19 countries. 5 continents, roughly 100 delegates, all of whom had to go through a preparatory process to represent real organizations and movements. So it wasn't just a bunch of intellectuals or random travelers. It was people who represented movements. And they came together for about 3 days in an Afro-Venezuelan community way out in the center of the country, and made a hip-hop music video. I'm going to go into more detail about what happened to that event, but this next video, which is in Spanish and English, which includes, there were 5 artists that happened to be there in the place, and one night they said, let's make a collaboration music video, and then they collaborated with a documentarian later. So even if you can't understand what's going on, what they're saying, you'll see in the background people from five continents gathering in an Afro-Venezuelan maroon community to save the world. So the next one has the same title, but in Spanish, and it's called Grito de la Madre Tierra.
Es el grito de la madre tierra, aguas negras, pero ella era muy Venezuela.
Oh, there's my Nefertiti. Some hearts possess a fire which pulsate for justice. Mother, trust this. Mother, right. Mother, fight. Mother, night. Mother, struggle. Mother, self-determined. Mother, autonomous. Mother, zapatista. Mother, anonymous. Mother, estás lista. Mother, guerrera. Mother, taína. Mother, boricua. Mother, chavista. Mother, Palestina. Mother, Irani. Mother, First Nation. Mother, Lebanon. Mother, ether. Mother, bumping through my speakers. Mother, art equals politics. Mother, maroon. Mother, I will see you soon. Mother, for you I write this tune. Mother, monsoon. Mother, tsunami. Mother, I'll be waiting for you at the border. Mother, you army. Mother, I am you. Mother, earth-centered. Mother, Nefertiti. Mother, Africa. Mother, Africa. Mother, Africa.
Resurgimos desde el fuego, el matriarcado en nuestro centro, apocentro esencial, expandiendo el espiral, danzando, cantando, creando nuestra realidad, meditando, sembrando, modificamos la vida. Somos nietos de las brujas que no pudieron quemar, organizados en comuna, damos inicio al ritual. Bombo y caja es la poción para vencer a tu Dios. Aquí hablamos con los árboles, sanando el corazón. Cimarrón en nuestra herencia, esencia que fluye en mis venas. Germinamos de la tierra, conciencia plena. Son tiempos venideros, unión de los guerreros, magos y chamarreros, guerrilleros, raperos, disolviendo las fronteras de las empresas gobierneras, titiriteros del humano que no se quiere liberar. Vibramos en amor, magia y revolución. Hepatico nuco.
Esto es una ceremonia, sí, un fragmento más de nuestra historia. Es nuestro presente y no le pongo fecha porque esto es para siempre. Hablando de la madre tierra en todo momento, el quinto elemento, el conocimiento, el fuego, el agua y el viento. Yo, en combinación con esto, además de la tierra y el espíritu, estamos interconectados con los hermanos mayores, organización por la defensa de la madre. Avanzando juntos, creciendo en espirales, protegemos las semillas ancestrales, sembrando y aprendiendo de los pueblos originales. En conversaciones, necesidades reales nos alumbran el camino Es la madre tierra, el amor de nuestros niños. Es la madre tierra, el amor de nuestros niños.
Aquí están tus hijos, madre tierra, a tu grito respondimos. Basta de cosillo, en tu tierra me acobijo. De tu aire respiro, de tu agua bebo. El fuego enciendo, autodefensa mi verbo. Forever, en esta lucha universal entono mi flavor. Siempre tejiendo, no hay competencia. Retejiendo Pangea, ese que es el grito de la madre tierra. Una sola sangre, 5 territorios diluyendo el odio. Hijo de Ali, también de Chávez. Somos la lucha de los pueblos, tú sabes. Sembraremos y venceremos. Hueca y Puruanaca, una para Maconi, Taíno, Guanacarina, Rote, quien en contra. Si la misión no la culmino, alguien la retoma.
Hades produce, Abraham en el beat, acá a estudio. Va.
Thanks, everybody. Hope you like that too. Thanks for your patience. I know it's not all in the language that you're used to. What you were seeing there in the background was a mix of people sitting in working groups having discussions, and then every evening there would be a cultural ceremony slash concert show put on by the local towns. So you were seeing like a mix of very traditional Afro-Venezuelan folklore and indigenous communities from the Amazon, from the very distant regions outside the city having discussions and making a 500-year plan of action. So this is a document. I've got some extra copies I'll hand out here afterwards. It's a document written by 200 hands. 100 people contributed to it. I can't think of any other, and I'm putting it out there if people know of anything else like that. It spans a time frame of 500 years. It's organized into 5 elements, which you saw maybe a little bit in that video, and it has a root of struggle. So the next video, which we're going to play, is just a very brief clip, like 1 minute long, announcing this to the world. This was a video that was made, released a little bit before the one that you just saw, which explains, here it is, we founded an Eco-Socialist International, it has a plan of action, and each of these in the background are faces of delegates from around the world who participated. I'll let it roll.
Las y los invitamos a ser parte de la primera internacional ecosocialista.
Conociendo, asumiendo y comprometiéndose a cumplir con una o varias de las acciones consensuadas en esta estrategia y plan de acción conjunta.
Favoreciendo la viabilidad del mismo para aliviar nuestra madre tierra. Favoreciendo la interconexión de pueblos, movimientos, organizaciones y colectivos en este espiral de espirales.
Actuando a su vez como catalizadores de nuevas fuerzas e iniciativas para ir ampliándolo hasta que todas y todos estemos nuevamente entretejidos con la madre tierra.
Numeral, todos juntos somos la primera internacional ecosocialista.
Nadie lo es individualmente. Si deseas conocer la estrategia y el plan de acción conjunto completo,
si quieren agregar el nombre de su colectivo, organización o movimiento a la lista de adhesiones
o enviar fotos para reportar las acciones del plan que contribuyan a su cumplimiento en los siguientes correos.
Llamado losduendes@gmail.com en español, prefiguration@gmail.com en inglés.
Nosotros mismos somos, aquí es que es y ahora es cuando.
All right, ta-da! A new actor has entered into the stage of geopolitics, a grassroots alliance of people from all around the world, 5 continents, who have written their own plan of actions. And it's not about denunciations or demands, it's all immediately practical things that we can do in the short term, and nobody can do it all together, but if we all join forces, hopefully we can make it happen. So this was done in the end of 2017. Myself, along with many others, came back to the United States very inspired, and we're looking for ways to plant the seeds of this plan of action and this new idea around the United States. So we went to, there were various events that took place in the United States in 2018, starting in January. There was a couple events from the opposite sides of the coast. We could talk about some big cities like New York City and Los Angeles, where there were at least several events in each place. But then there's some smaller places like Pleasant Street Books, where we had a small discussion. There was an event in Pittsburgh. There was an event in New Orleans. And then, you know, it was decided after we've done a few of these things, hey, let's get together the people who are really behind this and have a national meeting about, in the United States, of people in the U.S. who are interested in this. And this leads us to our next documentary, and it's something I think it's one of the most exciting things happening in the United States today in Jackson, Mississippi. Has anybody here already heard about an organization called Cooperation Jackson? Yeah, all right, great. Okay, excellent. So for folks who don't know, there's a long history, but I'll just sort of fast forward to the most recent few years. There has been a radical transformation in this city, which they have a new mayor elected. His name was Chokwe Lumumba. This is in, you know, the heart of the Confederate states, right? This is a black revolutionary movement, but which is not black nationalist. They work with white people, Latino people, anywhere, and the whole thing is based on building a sustainable future through cooperatives, and worker-owned cooperatives is really the thing that do ecological production, and they do everything from like lawn care to digital fabrication. It's like a very futuristic plan, but people have moved there to work on this. You don't have to go all the way to Rojava in Kurdistan or to Chiapas in Mexico to learn about an ecological society and try to commit yourself to building one. You can do it right here in the United States. The mayor of the city made it public. He said, we want to make Jackson the most radical city on the planet for environmental justice. And of course, there's many complications, as we learned when we went down there in a process like this. But the video that you're about to see is it's a little bit longer, and it's all in English. It's a short documentary that was made to document this process, which happened in, I think, I'm gonna get the date wrong, but it was last year, 2018, and it brought together people from California, New Orleans, New York, Jackson. I'm going to miss some cities, but it was a nationally distributed thing. Buffalo, New Mexico came to meet for 4 days to say, how are we going to get this idea to launch in the United States? And this was all hosted by Cooperation Jackson. This is only one short video about this meeting we had in Jackson, but I encourage everybody to look up more about Cooperation Jackson, look at more documentaries about them, and to support them, because what they're doing right now is, I think, extremely exciting, and it really needs our support, because you can imagine somebody named Lumumba promoting, this guy Kali Akuno in Cooperation Jackson promoting an eco-socialist international solidarity message in the heartland of white supremacy. They need all the support they can get. So moving on to the next video here. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to say before it begins. No, I think we'll just let it roll, and we'll have, at the end of all this, we'll have Q&A.
This emerging international is not formed primarily along party lines. So it's different than some of the internationals before. Anybody who's down with this set of ideas, set of principles, whether you're with a party, you're with a collective, acting as an individual, you're acting in a commune, whatever it may be, if you can get down with this in practice, then we think this is a space for you, and we want to ask you to join it. Since 2004, I've been involved in some of the major climate actions around the world. And we've been, to a degree, conference hopping, trying to influence what was going on in Copenhagen, Paris. And that plays its role, it has its significance, but we keep meeting on their terms, within the parameters and framework that they're largely setting. At what point are we going to set the terms of the conversation and debate, and then at what point are we going to move, to real concrete action?
I was one of the participants in Venezuela in the founding of the International of Eco-Socialism, going into the rural area of Yaracuy, in this sort of Afro-descendant, maroon town that have tried to figure out how they're going to create food security for themselves and going back to their historical roots of the type of food that they have. And during a massive political war that's happening in Venezuela, they could house 100 people from around the world. That was very transformative.
In the process of bartering and trading that is especially strong in Afro-Venezuelan communities that hosted the first Eco-Socialist International, you have an ability to not solve all of the problems, but to say, hey, if the problems on the ground in our communities are not about what we have and don't have, but about money, then let's eliminate that problem altogether. Let's trade what we have and talk to one another, trade with one another, that no one is lacking without a dollar bill exchanging hands, that we are fed, that we are housed, that we have the educational, the medical, the interpersonal needs all met.
Where people have experience of sustainable living and have had a culture of doing that hasn't been interfered with or hasn't been successfully stopped, they are apt to be at a higher rate of civilization about adapting to a future in which we're going to need levels of sustainability that our Western civilization or lack of civilization has run into problems with.
The Venezuelan state supported us, but it was all directed, led, and controlled by grassroots communities. We don't want to divide ourselves, we need to unite ourselves and bring together people that don't usually talk. So the idea was that the body of Mother Earth herself would be our form of organization. So we divided ourselves among the 5 elements, and each group had the task of coming up with a plan of action over the short, medium, and long term.
Entonces nos planteamos hablar sobre el aire como la voz de la Madre Tierra, hablar sobre el fuego como las energías de la Madre Tierra, la tierra, todo lo que tiene que ver con la salud, la alimentación, el agua como la leche de la Madre Tierra y finalmente el éter o el espíritu. Echar para atrás 500 años para ver 500 años adelante. Eso se corresponde con momentos de la humanidad donde el colonialismo comenzó a invadir diferentes territorios, sobre todo a Asia, África y América. El colonialismo europeo se planteó ir a posesionarse de las tierras y de los recursos de los otros.
All the language of the plan, you'll read, it's we will do this, we commit to doing this, we weren't here to make demands. The powers that be are doing their job, the question is, what are we going to do?
Now that there's this plan of action, what greater place to come to spread the news in the United States than Jackson, that is trying to become the most radical, transformative city with an organization like Cooperative Jackson's, who has been laying a lot of the ground to talk about solidarity economy, about just transitions, about ecological sustainability.
The solidarity economy from Co-op Jackson is specifically mentioned in the Eco-Socialist program, and so that's what drew us here. We are an agent of bridge building at the societal level on what practices and designs of human society we can reach consensus accords on that are life-serving and that we preserve as such, and which we abandon as obsolete to thriving wellness in the world.
Welcome to historic Jackson. Mississippi had 555 free people during slavery. Most of them lived in this area. This was so well developed and so controlled by black folk that some of the wealthiest people in the country, the most famous entertainers, writers, Du Bois and all of them came along this street. Poor black people came from around the state trying to fashion a better life for themselves in the Great Migration. They will migrate into Jackson and regional cities across the South as they migrate north. And let me say that the Jackson movement and the Birmingham movement were parallel movements running at the same time. Same themes, same issues.
All the problems that we face in this world, it's all based on some form of separation. Even the destruction of the planet, which is entirely something that's caused by human beings, came from our anthropocentric mindset. Anthropocentrism, seeing us as something different or at the center of or separate from the earth and everything else, is the, you know, and only our needs need to be met at the expense of everything else.
We don't view the earth as an entity or as like a living spirit, so like that, or like like the trees and all these things, so like they're just commodities and resources, even within a lot of socialist circles. So I feel people are trying to recreate a consciousness that's been just tried to be destroyed and taken off the earth.
At some point in the recent past, I began to realize that the paradigm of socialist revolution that we had always been struggling for, the idea that we would take control of the industrial economy and use it for collective good instead of for private profit, that there was a problem even with that, given the level of industrials. And in the 1950s, you could say that we could do something like that and still have an ecological relationship with the earth. Today, it's impossible.
The rape of Africa, you know, the rape of Asia, the rape of these minerally rich, fertile areas, right, is directly connected to the industrialization that have led to the destruction of our planet. You know what I'm saying? And then you can't separate how the people that live in these rich areas are treated in order to get them out of the way to get to these things.
How do you look at the world from the integrated systems of how the world itself works and why it works this particular way here, and how does that relate to, you know, the deserts in North America and Africa, etc., and bringing all that knowledge together. I think this particular process and the people who to this point have been assembled in it are struggling through those types of questions in a way we haven't necessarily done collectively anyway in a long time.
You've got to go through the process where you actually sit down and not vote things out, but talk it through until everybody is satisfied, they understand and accept it.
Coming into this room, I knew one other family, and now I know a whole collective of other people, and we will network and we'll be able to work together and then go over to other countries and network. And I think it's all about helping each other.
To me, the most important thing is to create very strong grassroots ecological communities in which people live their lives in a different way. And on the basis of that, we can join together in mass movements around the world and reverse the course of really the destruction of the course of evolution and the liberation of life on Earth.
For us, it's like, well, how do we heal the soil? How do we start to move our community towards food security, food sovereignty? And then more important than that, how do those practices transform the society?
It's important to see where your food comes from. It's important to be involved and to also not worry about yourself, but worry about the animals and the environment around you.
A form of socialism that has like the environment and our relationship to it at the heart of what it's trying to do is like, it's just so crucial during this time. There are certain things that like once they happen, we can't necessarily reverse them, like environmentally speaking. So if we don't address this now, we don't know if we're gonna have a future.
I believe in a social ecological revolution that would destroy all systems of domination, and that if we don't do that, we're in real serious trouble.
Here we are now, and this laid out. Talk about I can't do this and that. Yes, we can. There's nothing except capitalism with its borders and its boundaries that has been set up to keep us from surviving, to keep us dependent on either ignorant ideologies or ignorant economic systems and human beings.
We have to develop goals that, you know, like match some common unity goals. I think that's a big important thing that we can work on together. Some goals and some unity that like makes sense in all the different places that we come from.
The process of grassroots building of independent alternative realities, realities that both enable and empower people, but also create a harmony with the earth. This is the realities of eco-socialism.
Seeing like the lived experiences of people who may not even necessarily be using the word eco-socialism, but who like those principles are part of their like daily life. A lot of Black, Indigenous, and Campesino communities in Latin America.
It's a time when we must join with Mother Earth and begin in the mothering process, the recreating process, all over again, so that we can reclaim not just water resources and land resources, but reclaim our basic humanity.
Thank you. So thanks very much, everybody. I know you may already have questions or concerns or ideas, but there's just one more video, and then we can have a conversation about all of it together. So this is a perfect segue here. One of the things we talked about a lot in Jackson was planning for the next stop on the route of struggle. The plan of action that came out of Venezuela, at the end of it, there's a route of struggle, which lists some actions that were proposed. And the first action that was proposed is we will have this first international encounters of sowers and guardians of water. And that's the next video that we'll see. This took place in Cochabamba in November. There were, it was mainly this hemisphere, almost entirely this hemisphere. There were indigenous peoples from the Seneca and the Mohawk up in Canada-US border, all the way down to the Mapuche in Chile, with a lot of people in between, including the Yaqui, Quechua. I'm not going to name them all, there were a few names, and people came from probably about 8 different countries in Latin America, and then there was also one delegate from Kurdistan, from the Mesopotamian ecology movement. So this next video, this is kind of the feature of the evening actually, because this has not been screened before, this is the premiere, and you may already have questions, what's a sower of water, etc. You'll find out, I hope. And I want to publicly thank Ann McSude of Old Dog Documentaries for getting the English subtitles to this next piece. And this is the last one. Thanks for your patience in advance, and thanks for sticking around.
La relación que la mayoría de los seres humanos tenemos con el agua es para gastarla, ¿ya? Y muy poca gente está sembrando. Que esa desarmonía que hay entre la producción y el consumo se pueda nivelar mínimamente. Porque si hay muy pocos sembrando y hay muchos gastando, las pocas fuentes de agua que tenemos en el mundo, sin duda que van hacia la crisis.
¿Qué crees que va a pasar con el mundo de aquí a unos 100 años?
No sé, porque ya no da también papa, ahora también más antes daba, ahora ya no quiere dar con nomás ya, con, ¿qué se llama? Con remedios así fumigamos. Eso no me se da.
¿Y sus fumicidas?
Cuando no fumigamos, ya no da. Pues, los bichos entran, ya no da.
Nosotros casi en el valle, Nata es un valle, y allá donde producimos maíz y hortalizas. Y justamente, pero estamos preocupados como regantes, el agua es muy poco. Y casi nosotros al año regamos 2 veces, y largamos 2 veces, regamos 2 veces. Pero no, nosotros no garantizamos nuestros productos con 2 largadas. Entonces, nosotros probablemente necesitamos más agua. Sí, pues.
¿Con qué vamos a cosechar? Siempre perdemos. Claro, hay veces la lluvia también adelanta y con la lluvia más eso nos ayuda bastante para la cosecha.
Bueno, el conflicto que nosotros llevamos acá siempre, no es ahora, y siempre el conflicto siempre lo tenemos. ¿Por qué? Es por el motivo de el riego que nosotros proveemos de las alturas que viene, esto siempre es muy poco.
¿Y a las 2 somos? Por ejemplo, este lugar es que tiene agua mágica. Entonces tenemos también varias futuras, también tenemos, de verdad tenemos harto agua. Entonces en ese caso también nosotros, pero mira, para riego también a veces no nos alcanza, ¿no? Pero también para... Estoy en un día con 140 personas. Eso sí, que son bien. Yo, mi gringo, lo sacudo igual.
Como todo ser humano me preocupo por el futuro de la humanidad, que incluso la sobrevivencia de la especie humana está en peligro. Igual como todas las especies, estamos en la 6ª extinción masiva en la historia del planeta. Como ser que nací en Estados Unidos, del gran imperio, yo siento un empuje aún más para hacer más, porque yo tengo conocimiento de que el gobierno de mi país es como el peligro más grande que tiene la humanidad, con las armas nucleares, con el fracking, con todo, las guerras que están prendidos ahora son 6 países, algo así, que se estamos bombardeando. Todos hemos venido aquí para aprender de qué significa sembrar agua, qué significa, cómo hacemos esta cosa que se llama la crianza comunitaria del agua. Porque esto es la cosa que más necesita la humanidad en ese momento. Que los médicos mayores que necesita la humanidad son la gente que saben sembrar agua. Sembrar agua es una cosa que implica un conocimiento botánico, geológico, zoológico y espiritual a veces, para ir a las cuencas a asegurar que fluye el agua. A veces hay manantiales que se han secado. Un sembrador de agua se metería ahí a sembrar las plantas que había en tiempos anteriores, a introducir los animales que habían, y así restablecer el ciclo de agua. Es una ciclo de vida que implica relaciones entre seres vivos. Y un sembrador de agua es una persona que conoce ese enlace que tiene la vida. Y a veces también lleva una gran mística, hacen ceremonias a llamar el agua para que llueve, para que brote. Y bueno, estos son seres casi en peligro de extinción. Y creemos que en ese momento de la humanidad tan precarioso, tan peligroso, tenemos que escuchar a los sembradores de agua.
Por ahí pasaba un río. Por ahí pasaba el río también.
Ajá.
¿Y qué pasó con el río?
El agua, o si no se va por aquí arriba, por ahí, o si no por aquí abajo, o si no por allá.
¿Que cuando llueve se llenan?
Sí.
Solo una quebrada.
Le voy a soplar y voy a pedir un deseo para Nancy. Que Nancy se case con... Solo yo sé. La maestra de esa escuela, ¿verdad? Con los libros vivientes, sembradores de agua, ¿verdad? Que son los que guían el proyecto, anduvieron investigando sobre las plantas que llaman agua. Bueno, hicieron su recorrido, fueron, ¿verdad?, a identificar las plantas, a ver cómo ellas trabajaron con el río que les queda muy cerca de la comunidad, el río Marcano.
Y los sembradores le fueron hablando de varios árboles que llaman agua, o plantas que llaman agua. Y luego ellas hicieron algunos recursos para los aprendizajes, ¿verdad? Para fijar la información que habían dado los libros vivientes. Este es uno de esos recursos, ¿verdad? Que es un árbol que llama agua, ¿verdad? Aquí hay varias plantas, entonces está el vetiver, la moringa. Bueno, también se hace un aceite del vetiver. También una planta llamadora de agua. Bueno, en el campo le damos un uso, por ejemplo, cuando uno anda por el campo trabajando, que no lleva agua, pero hay pozos donde se puede beber agua, se hace un cono, ¿verdad? Con esas hojas ya y se toma la agüita.
No le pusimos nombres a los conejos.
Sí, el gato estaba comiendo agua.
¿Y quién hace basura?
Es fácil, solo le hacemos dar vueltas, se enrolla,
¿Y tú?
Harto teníamos todo esto llenito, todo lo hemos vendido, lo hemos matado.
¿Para comer?
Sí, se come.
Muy rica la carne de conejo.
¿Cómo la preparan?
Vivimos en un mundo donde prácticamente el sistema nos tiene cegados. Y vivimos en un mundo completamente distanciado y alejado de la realidad. Lo que decía, creemos que el agua viene de las tuberías y creemos que también los alimentos vienen del supermercado. Entonces vamos entrando en un conocimiento de la realidad de nuestra naturaleza. Vamos abriendo también un campo de relación distinto, donde los niños van tejiendo una relación mucho más cercana con la naturaleza, que no es una relación de sometimiento, como se suele hacer dentro de las actividades que se desarrollan con la tierra, con la madre tierra. Hay otros seres que están trabajando por detener el avance de un proceso que es de destrucción completa de la naturaleza. Mientras otros destruyen, y son más los que destruyen, ¿verdad? Vamos avanzando también un ejército en la perspectiva de poder sembrar y recuperar las fuentes de agua. Y eso implica sembrar árboles.
Tú pones a una persona de la ciudad y pones a una persona ancestral, a una persona que viva en el medio, que haga naturaleza, y ven el bosque. Uno puede decir que ese bosque es verde, los árboles son grandes, pero no saben cuándo se da fruto, para qué sirve esa planta, cuándo está en floración, qué animales se le acercan. Entonces, todo ese conocimiento, nosotros decimos que se puede perder si la escuela no asume la responsabilidad de buscar a los que tienen ese conocimiento para convertirlo en actividad pedagógica que garantice la continuidad de ese saber a través de los niños. Por eso decimos, quien tiene que sembrar agua es las escuelas que están en la cuenca, porque tienen permanencia.
Hace unos 20 años hemos empezado a forestar todas las quebradas con plantas introducidas, ¿ya? El pino y el eucalipto. Y ahora, después de 20 años, nos hemos dado cuenta que nos hemos equivocado en reforestar con las plantaciones más que todo de eucalipto.
Estamos tratando de proteger los lugares donde conocemos que hay fuente de emanación de agua, y para eso estamos plantando herbolaria nativa, que es la que en la cultura mapuche se conoce como árboles que mantienen el agua. Particularmente el pueblo mapuche, que somos los indígenas en mayor número ubicados en estas regiones que ya señalé, estamos afligidos por el agua para el consumo humano y peor todavía para el sistema de regadío, debido a que el Estado de Chile aplicó políticas de desarrollo, especialmente en nuestras regiones, con las empresas forestales, madereras, y que han intensificado tanto durante estos últimos 50 años prácticamente con pino y eucalipto, que son dos especies de rápido crecimiento que han succionado el agua en varios metros de profundidad. Soy Manuel Painiqueo Tragnolao, alcalde de la comuna de Lumaco, de la región de la Araucanía, a 600 kilómetros al sur de la capital de Chile, Santiago.
Mari lamuen, mari wentu, kumole kaimi inchenka kumolekan, kumole kaimi inchenka kumolekan, kumole kaimi inchenka kumolekan.
Capacho se llama, ¿verdad? Y entonces decimos en qué clima se da.
¿En qué clima se da el capacho?
Bueno, se da en piso térmico bajo cerca de los ríos, porque necesita mucha agua. Por ejemplo, una vez que explicamos...
¿Es un árbol?
Sí, no, es una matica pequeña así. Un símbolo que es que si yo traqueo con él, nos damos la mano y nos damos la palabra. La palabra de que la vamos a continuidad, porque la palabra se ha perdido. Y entonces es como decir, va la palabra.
Va la palabra.
Y la palabra es como que yo voy a aprender tu semilla y tú vas a aprender la mía.
Taruitas.
No vendemos tanto, comemos.
Siembras antes y tiene una ventaja, hermanos, de que cuando cocinas también cuece biencito ya. ¿No ve? Eso es la ventaja. Pero cuando siembras, hay ratos puede producir, puede dar. Siembras tardecita, pero ya no cuece bien el grano.
Le pone el nombrecito.
Esta mazorca como tal viene de la comunidad de Maturincito, la cumbre, de donde es nuestro sembrador de agua. La semilla la seleccionan. Luego de la cosecha seleccionan las mejores mazorcas dentro de estas, ¿verdad? Que están bien bonitas, bien organizado el maíz, para que el humo, ¿verdad?, preserve la semilla, que es una de las técnicas que ellos utilizan para la preservación de la semilla.
Bueno, yo no voy a buscar a ninguno de los que han truequeado conmigo, sino que ustedes me deben buscar a mí, ¿verdad? Porque ese es ¿qué dijo Gocho? ¿Trueque con qué? Con re... Sí, yo te doy hoy y tú me vas a dar mañana, ¿verdad? Pero usted me busca a mí, porque eso no es como cuando tú vendes fiado, que tú buscas al que te dé para que te pague, ¿no? Eso es una voluntad del que se llevó la cosa.
Bueno, lo más interesante de todo es que de las innumerables propuestas que han llegado de los diferentes países, hemos tenido una recepción maravillosa de los comités de regantes de tres grupos fuertes que son el grupo de regantes de Punata, de Tiraque y de Coari. En otras palabras, no solamente se han apropiado del discurso, sino que han dado un salto cualitativo.
Se ha llegado a conclusiones muy importantes. Forestar es un tema importantísimo. Todos los pueblos coinciden en reforestar y en cuidar los bosques. Ese es un planteamiento importantísimo. Otro importante es criar cuencas. Este también es un concepto que en primer lugar articula pueblos y articula países en función a una cuenca.
problems is more like environmental problems because of.
Con el agua, pues, en este caso, los seres humanos, la vida es el agua. Es la energía, es la que nos da fuerza para seguir caminando, porque si tenemos sed y tomamos agua, eso nos llena de fuerza, de energía, es la que amamantamos. Entonces, y si está contaminada, entonces esto también no cae bien para nuestra salud.
El problema de nosotros es estar muy cerca de los gringos, como pueden ver. Estamos cerca de Estados Unidos. Hablar de desierto, para que se den una idea, es que al año llueve normalmente 5 veces. Este es el río Yaqui, que ancestralmente aprovechaba la tribu Yaqui.
Que tiene mucha mística. Y el razonamiento del pueblo yaqui es que el yaqui nace del agua, en la conjunción de los elementos tierra, agua, aire, fuego, es que nace el pueblo yaqui.
Tenemos aquí una planta nuclear y también hay otra por ahí.
There's a lot of fracking.
También está mucho fracking, fractura hidráulica, y todos saben qué es esto, ¿no? Y todo el agua que se usa en esa presión ya nunca se puede usar ya, porque sale de nuevo a la cuenca y está totalmente contaminada y va a ser para siempre esta supercontaminada.
So there's starting to be swamps by these oil wells.
Entonces alrededor de estos taladros hay ya como pantanos.
And they're really like thick. The water is not even water anymore.
Y el agua de esos pantanos es como viscoso, que ni es agua.
I'm Kelly Miracle, and I'm from the Western New York area in the United States. My Seneca name is Godinko, and that means shy woman in English. Our biggest problem are probably pipelines and fracking oil. They contaminate our water, and also there's a couple of nuclear power plants that are close to my area, and they are dumping toxic garbage into our water.
What is fracking?
It's where they use drills to go down into beneath the water tables and break the shale table, and they use chemicals and tons of water to go ahead and burst out the oil to come through a natural gas. Get rid of our dependence on oil. There's so many green alternatives like wind, solar, that we should slack way off on the oil, and then we won't need oil production. I would like to see everybody, again, lower their dependence on oil and be more conscious of what's around us and use our natural resources, like the wind and the sun.
What need the human race to be conscious about these problems?
Education.
I am from Turkey, but I work in Germany because right now in Turkey the journalists cannot work freely, cannot criticize. They're not allowed to criticize anything. They can end up in prison, and this isn't the only journalists. Also, the people feel stuck right now in Turkey because they're going through a very hard process. They have no place to express themselves. I wanted the people in Turkey see that they're not alone, or they're not hopeless. There are a lot of people struggling just like them, and their resources are being exploited, their rights are being violated, but still they're going on, and they're calling for an international solidarity.
Yahweh.
So thank you everybody for coming. Yes. Oh yes, please. Sorry. And I'm also going to give you a plan of action here. I just wanted to say the couple quick follow-ups. People always ask me in this country. People ask, you hear this question a lot. What can we do? It's an irony because there is so much we can do, and you almost never hear that question in parts of the world where people have so little resources. But nonetheless, we're obliged to answer it. So if you could go over to that water map tab. I wanted to show you what people did in advance to come to Bolivia. I feel like this is something that could be done anywhere. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but when you saw in the video people pointing to maps, you remember that? This was all based on something they did. They organized themselves in communities to make maps of their territories in which they will locate our wise elders, the people's teachers and living books who inhabit our watersheds, our grandmothers who preserve memory. And then with their help, we will map, et cetera, et cetera. And they do this whole map of their whole watershed. And this is something that could be done in schools. It's something that could be done in a community organization. And it becomes very political very quickly because you realize, who's contaminating, who's chopping down the trees. Sometimes it's the church, sometimes it's your neighbor, or sometimes it's a Nestle, some transnational corporation. And then the last thing I'll say, this is available in the plan of action, this 9-point plan here I can hand out. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that at the conclusion of the Declaration of Quarte, they called that every April 4th should be an international day of action against the privatization of water. They chose the date of April 4th because in the year 2000, April 4th, the people of Bolivia kicked out the big transnational company Bechtel, which had privatized even the rainwater of that country. And there was this long struggle of years, and they kicked out this company. And in the wake of that victory, Bolivia became the first country in the modern world, in this whole continent of North and South America, to elect an American president, somebody an indigenous person who's actually from this land, which is surprising. It never happened before, but it was the first. So those are the two things I would say that if you're looking, what can I do? Map your watershed and make a plan for April 4th. So thanks for accompanying me on this journey from fast hip hop in Tanzania to very slow and serene, hardworking Bolivian campesino lifestyle. I'm open to answer questions and have conversation, and then we'll take a break. And then if anybody wants to stick around, we're going to play some music, but you're not required to. So open for questions or comments, and let's take a few.
So are they having any luck with preventing fracking in these communities?
Okay.
And how do they do it? I mean, how do they, if they're able to stop it, how do they do it?
Okay. Good one. Another question. I did two here. Whoever wants to go.
Was that you speaking Spanish?
It was.
Oh, yeah. I think it was.
My
Good
twins.
job.
Thank you.
Good job. Good recognition. That's not a question.
Comments, okay.
But just in regards to Venezuela, fracking, and what the United States is doing, remember reading or hearing that there's been a plan for a long time to get the Venezuelan oil because the pipeline all the way from Canada, I forgot what it's called. Is it the Keystone?
There's
One
a few.
of
That's
a
one
few
of
of
them.
those.
Yeah.
They need The oil to be processed needs the kind of oil that Venezuela produces or something. So this has been a long-term plan, and to get the pipeline to go where it will go close to Venezuela. Anyway, it's probably more than that, but just to bring up fracking.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to take a few and then we'll focus on
So my question is, like, particularly in relation to Jackson, Mississippi, how does this whole organization relate to labor unions and collective action through unions and teachers? You know, how are they making education cooperative in Jackson, Mississippi?
Okay.
And do they have food co-ops in Jackson?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
There's a large youth movement that's becoming aware of this. And kids are becoming aware of their earth is really polluted. Is there a part of this to, I guess it has to do with education, to harness that energy and to educate this generation that's just coming into awareness that they're inheriting a lot of problems.
Yep.
Really big demonstrations. I can't remember if it was today or yesterday, all over the in the schools to save our planet, all across the country.
Yeah.
I forgot the name of the movement, but yeah.
Anybody else want to make a question or comment before I run my mouth some more?
Have you ever heard of bioregionalism?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the watershed thing is the natural place to go, but the bioregionalism thing is more inclusive and encompassing.
Cool. Do you want to? If everybody heard of that? Do you want to say what it is? Or?
Well, I just looked it up so I could refresh my memory.
Oh no! You took out the phone.
Yeah, I did. Hey.
All right, disqualified.
Well, it's my other brain. It's actually everybody else's brain too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Why only use mine? Advocacy of the belief that human activity should be largely restricted to district, ecological, and geographical regions. Well,
Okay.
That's not quite it, but basically it's more than just, like, what you find is that a watershed is still connected to other
community.
things, and you might, like, it's sort of the delineation of land so that it's more of an ecological approach that includes more than just where water goes.
Right.
It's also maybe the forest. You might have an entire forest, so you might draw the lines around the region differently.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy who wrote a book about it who was connected to it. Also, it seemed like there was the moringa tree. I was in Cuba, and that's everywhere.
Yep.
And it was like imported from Africa, and it's a weed, and they say it's got no seeds. You can't burn it. It's a problem actually they're experiencing. And I was also affected by the concept that they said that they're trying to attract water by planting plants. It's an interesting thing because I've studied desertification, and certainly it's the transpiration of the plants, which is the releasing of the water into the atmosphere that makes local raining, basically.
Yeah.
But the whole reversing of that, how do you do that, right? So you have to figure, you plant plants, it's going to suck up the water. They were talking about poco, like they were talking about a little water, and I just thought about, this is a very long-term plan. It's just what you're saying. It's like, you're going to lose water on the short term by planting trees. And if they can afford to lose that, if they're living on such a little amount, And then, do they know how long it's going to take for reforestation to start making local weather? And I wonder. I wonder if there are studies on that. It'd be
There are.
interesting. Yeah, there would have to be, right? There are. Okay. Well, I'd like to hear about that. I grew up in a place near King of Prussia Mall, where which was the biggest mall in America at one time, and it was all tar. Well, there's another one in Washington D.C. is the Mall of America, but it's the King of Prussia Mall, and they tarred it over, and it has its own weather. It rains like at 4 o'clock in the afternoon because of the heat from the black tar, and that was a pretty rapid process that it started to do that. So it'd be interesting to see how rapidly it could be reversed.
Excellent. Thank you. Shall I take a stab at it?
Yes.
All right. So the first, I'll take them in order. Fracking is not in Bolivia yet. So this was actually a wake-up call for me when I was translating for this Seneca woman, and she said, I sort of threw out, everybody's heard of fracking, right? And people were like, no. So they are at the beginning stages. The best way to stop fracking, in fact, the only way to stop fracking is to stop it before it starts. If folks have seen the movie Gasland, or if you don't want to watch the whole movie, just fast forward to the part where the guy lights his tap water on fire. So that's what we're at risk here. Huge parts of Pennsylvania, I still don't think we've really fathomed what we've done. Those watersheds are dead forever. I mean, and when I say forever, I mean millions of years. I mean, I don't know, depending on, that's a regeneration question, how long it'll take. The best efforts that I know of stopping fracking, there's some work that's been done in New York State. They've managed to ban fracking in New York, which was a big struggle. It was a grassroots struggle to force Cuomo to sign that bill. And it's not total. It's always a struggle because you're going to win it, and they'll come around some other way. Like they're using I read a report that they're using the frack slurry to put on roads in the winter because it's cheaper than salt in New York. So even though fracking is banned, people are still getting the contamination. So fracking is really a life or death situation, not only for one generation but for like thousands of generations in the future. And places like Venezuela, Bolivia, around South America, fracking is already in Mexico. These are countries which still have a chance to stop it. And the foreign corporations always use some sort of political crisis as an opportunity to come in and push their thing. The new president of Mexico recently signed some fracking deal. They got a political crisis, and you got to shake one hand here and another hand there, and we got to look out for that. And I would say the other model, most obviously, the most thing that comes to mind of a way to stop something is what happened a couple of years ago in North Dakota, and it's trying to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline, which was unsuccessful in stopping the pipeline, but it was successful in igniting the biggest indigenous solidarity event in American history, including pre-Columbian. So that's very interesting. I'll move on to Cooperation Jackson. I recommend in particular, there's this great book, maybe you've already read it, called Cooperation Jackson, Jackson Rising. I really recommend it to everybody. It's written by about a dozen people. It's very inspiring. In terms of the question about unions, I don't have the data to give it off the top of my head. I know, however, specifically that that's one of the central issues they're addressing is how to form a union co-op alliance, which doesn't really exist thus far. One of the things which Kali Akuno, who you saw speaking in there a lot, talks about a lot is how all these unions have big pension funds, what unions are left have big pension funds, and what do they do with that money? They invest it in the stock market, right? Well, why not invest it in your local cooperative economy? And then you might actually get, a return, and then you're not subject to the whims of the traders on Wall Street. So they're at the beginning stages of working through that. Of course, one of the things that we're up against is that union density in the United States is at something like 6%. Like, there's almost nobody is in a union unless you're a teacher or in some sort of public federal employment. The main thing that they have right there, not so much as education co-ops, they are doing a lot of independent education work in their center. They have weekly seminars, people come of all ages, They have, seminars with people Skyping in from around the world. The main thing they are doing a lot more of is food co-ops. They have a catering co-op and a garden co-op. So the garden gives to the caterer, and then the caterer, and then they actually just bought a whole shopping mall. It's pretty exciting. They're going to call it the Fannie Lou Hamer Shopping Center. And the idea is to create a whole new supply chain so that you have the food processing, supermarket, all controlled within a holistic vision of again, not producing for profit, but for the needs of the people that are there and within the context of their local environment. So that's a little bit of answer. Maybe you already knew everything I just said.
I didn't.
But
Why would you? If it's a real cooperative, you wouldn't need unions.
Why not? A lot of co-ops are unionized.
Yeah, but in
the
the kind of co-op where the workers own.
That's a collective.
Well, in
Or
my
a-
mind, it's a co-op too.
well, I'm not going to weigh in on this one. I'll let you guys sort that one out.
To me, that's the
We'll
whole point.
discuss that
There's
later.
workers
That's the whole
co-op.
point.
There's workers co-op and consumer co-ops. That's
Yeah.
one thing.
Right.
But anyway,
So, but the one that you're talking about, are they talking about workers co-ops?
they are most there doing worker co-ops.
Yeah.
There may be some consumer co-ops in Jackson as well. What's happening in Cooperation Jackson has a long history. It goes all the way back before the Civil Rights Movement. This movement, Cooperation Jackson, started in 2014, but it's an heir to a legacy that goes way back. And to the Colia Clark, who you saw speaking there, the older woman who was explaining the street, she was Medgar Evers' field secretary, and she's been up to Vermont actually giving some talks around here. And she gives a sense of the immense history which is culminating in Jackson today, and it's which is remarkably uniquely open to outside support, influence, and suggestion. Much different to a lot of, which is a risk that they're taking. They're kind of going all in on this program. And what's inspiring to me in terms of young people, I'll segue with that, is I met people my age who had moved to Jackson from cities like Los Angeles and New York and left behind much more exciting career paths to move to a city that's not particularly, you don't think of it as a big tourist destination with a lot of going on. And these young people, it's really inspiring. They said, we've been talking about this stuff all our lives, about another society, let's go build it, let's go do it. And I hadn't sort of seen that in the United States in a similar way in a long time. I want to say something about the youth thing. I think you don't need me to tell you that the youth are, and I'm talking about people younger than me, people 12 years old. You hear some of these talks they're giving online, and very moving speeches people are giving. One initiative that I'm particularly inspired by, which could be replicated here, I think, which was talked about in the Bolivia video, is how important it is to take control of these schools so that they're not just places where kids learn how to tolerate boredom and pass SATs, but actually make a contribution to their community. And the first step is you find the wise elders, these people who are almost, no longer with us, who have this knowledge, and bring them into the school. And they call them in Venezuela the living books, and bring them into the school so that these children will be able to pass on this knowledge. Because the danger these children face, who are given a lot of attention, when whether it's anti-gun stuff or climate stuff, they get a lot of attention. They do need guidance, and I know this myself. You say, the young people are going to change the world all by themselves. It's like, if they're not connected to their grandmothers and grandfathers who can give them some ancestral wisdom, I don't have my hopes up for kids that they'll just figure it out all by themselves. No, I think people of the predominant age of the people in this room have a huge role to play in this youth movements. So this idea, there's this thing in Venezuela called Escuelas de Cuenca que siembran agua, schools that are located in watersheds that sow water. And they teach the kids from a young age, they do this water mapping, and they learn from the elder in their town, and they go out and they do the water mapping, and they start learning the plants. And one of the gentlemen in the video said, these are the institutions that are most important because these are the ones that they're there permanently. They can ensure the transmission of knowledge from the elders to the young, so that this knowledge isn't lost. So I think that's something that could be done around here and is inspiring. Did you have a quick question? Comment?
I guess I just want to add a comment.
Please.
Speaking now as an anthropologist, that this is a perfect model for reproduction of a community, of stable transmission from one generation to another. But you really want to think hard whether or not that's what you want. It looks very nice if you come from an urban background, and it looks very exciting. Try it sometime.
Right. No, I mean, this is a very good point. I think, you know, I certainly knew this growing up here. Rural communities are often sites of extreme prejudice and conservatism and stuck in the mud and isolated. And
where do our kids go?
And the kids all go run away to the cities. Yeah, including I did that too. So I just lived in the city for 8 years, and I've realized that there's no hope. There are all these coastal cities are going underwater, and people aren't going to realize in time to stop. You know, so I think that this is a challenge. We have to transform the city and the countryside. I don't. There's no need to romanticize for a rural audience the benefits of rural life. I think we all know the problems. Hopefully, it's a process, and now that we've got these secondary brains, as our friend pointed out, you know, rural life doesn't have to be as disconnected as it has been always in the past. We can have a great degree of high culture and entertainment and literature anywhere in the world, which wasn't always the case. Last question about bioregions. I think I want to focus on this. I'm going to say a couple things. That occurred to me is something that happened in Bolivia. If you were to do this map here, this will eventually, I'll get to your point. If you were to go and do this even just in Woodstock, you're going to realize something really, really quickly, which is very interesting, which is that the political boundaries that we live in do not correspond in any way often to the ecological place that we live in. And it's almost universal. I challenge you, go look at it. Look at a lake, look at a watershed, look at an ocean. Every time the political boundaries go right down through the middle.
And watersheds are huge.
And they're huge.
What do you mean by political boundaries?
So like municipality, state,
and
county and government. So like if you need I don't know where like the main watershed of Woodstock is, but you know, we could use this example for the Seneca woman. Her watershed is split between the U.S. and Canada, and they've got like military bases and nuclear power plants and all these different jurisdictions. So if you actually want to solve a holistic ecological problem, you have to. It requires a revolution against the political system. And it's not even ideological. You know, it's just like the fact of the matter, basic empirical science.
I wonder if you can gerrymander watersheds.
Yeah, there we go. With tubes. I'm sure they'll work on that one however they can. Another thing you said about plant perspiration, I think this was something that blew my mind. I was struggling to understand this concept of water sowing, because sowing is something we think about with plants. And somebody shared a statistic with me there, which, you know, correct him if this is way off, but he said that of the water cycle of the rain, about 20% of it is produced through evaporation from the ocean, and 80% is produced through plant perspiration.
Known as transpiration.
Transpiration.
It's the same kind of thing.
So let's wrap our heads. So suddenly sowing water makes a lot more sense. Suddenly you realize, you know, if you're not, that the water cycle is a life cycle.
It inverts causality, though, and that's what annoyed me when you were describing it in such positive terms. That are you patronizing your audience, or don't you know better?
I didn't know better.
Okay.
I didn't know better personally. Okay. That 80% of our rain comes from plants.
But it ain't. You know, the physics of it is kind of mind-boggling.
Right? Yeah. Agreed. So I think that these kinds of things can help us. I think that, you know, this kind of a perspective, a bioregional perspective, focusing on water. I've been to a dozen and more, several dozen meetings about climate change. You probably all have done this experience as well. You all go to the meeting to talk about climate change, let's say, and you start with the assumption that this is the biggest crisis humanity has ever faced and it requires a total change in our way of life, and then you leave the meeting saying, let's go put a Band-Aid on something. And this happens almost every time, and we might not see it in those terms, but we got to fix climate change. Okay, let's go write a letter to our senator and donate money to a nonprofit and have a march in our local town. And we seem to be stuck in that. And something that I found in Bolivia, which was amazing, is you just start up, let's just talk about water. And people come to the most revolutionary, wild, demanding conclusions possible, because that is what's necessary to preserve the water cycles on our planet, to preserve the Amazon, to preserve the fight against ocean acidification. All these things are required. So maybe I'll wrap up, unless anybody has another thing to say. I guess I'd just like to share again that this is, thank you for accompanying this journey all around the world. I hope it wasn't incoherent and that it made sense to you, how it's all connected. The main thing I guess I want to say is that there's a saying that bad news travels fast. We get it instantly. And good news travels slowly. So this has been a little bit of good news to share with you this evening. It's gradually transpiring through the life cycle. And you're all invited. And to conclude with that, I'm going to give you all this document, which begins with the cry of Mother Earth and then goes on to the plan of action. This is all free online as well. And then I'd also say as well, I'm a comic book author. We have 2 comic books here, which are available only at Pleasant Street Books. So if anybody would like, I'm saying this for the TV audience as well, you can enjoy that. And so thanks again for your time. And when you're done, if you'd like to stick around, have a beer, and stick around for some music, or go on your way happily and keep in touch. Thank you.
So I just want to mention, Quincy, a few things that are happening right here in Vermont.
Please, listen up.
There's an organization called the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition, and another one called the Soil Carbon Coalition, which is working on ways to reverse carbon change, climate change, by sequestering carbon in the soil, and it's happening all around the state. And in Bennington, there's a wonderful author named Judith Schwartz who's written a book called Cows Save the Planet, published by Chelsea Green Press in White River, and another book called Water in Plain Sight, and it's all about transpiration and where different water projects in the world.
I don't see anybody taking notes. I'm going to take notes. I'll be the only one. I don't know if somebody on TV is taking notes.
And Judith Schwartz will be speaking the first, I think, Tuesday in March at the Montshire Museum for the Hanover Garden Club.
Great.
Schwartz? Where?
Montshire.
When?
What was the title of the book again?
Water in Plain Sight.
It's in Norwich.
The Montshire Museum of Science in Norwich.
In plain sight. And cows save the
planet.
All right, look at this. Nobody wants to leave. This is great. Comfy chairs.
Do a quick stretch though.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, you're all welcome to stick around.
Okay.
Thank you. That was Spiritual by John Coltrane.
Oh.
And I heard a great quote recently. I can't remember who said it, so you'll have to look it up for yourselves. That the greatest the greatest secret about the material world is that there are spiritual secrets. And the greatest secret of the spiritual world is that there are no secrets. Entirely sure what that means yet, but give it to the rest of you.
There are no
secrets.
secrets.
There are no secrets. Yeah, no, I think it's pretty deep, but give it some thought, maybe.
That rivals that Nagarjuna one we talked about earlier today.
We'll spare that for Nagarjuna's tetralema if you want to go even deeper down the rabbit hole.
Well, we'll do another one. That was we'll do one by me called Bolivar.
Great. Sorry.
And I bet everybody here has heard that. So there we go. I'll do the introduction.
Yeah. Recommend that everybody, especially people who are familiar with the Pleasant Street Books show on WCTV, may have heard this song before. So it's another opportunity to investigate the life of Simón Bolívar, perhaps more relevant now than ever. A really unique character in U.S. history. And one quote I'll share. You shared a great one the other time about plowing the sea. And I would recommend also, if you want a book to check out to begin with, there's a great novel by Gabriel Garcia Marquez called The General and His Labyrinth. It's a good place to start, maybe, if that's easier than a history book. But he said, and let's see if we can prove him wrong, that the United States appears destined by Providence to plague the Americas with misery in the name of liberty.
Bolivar said that?
Yeah, in like early 1800s.
Yeah.
I think.
That was pretty advanced thinking.
Yeah. And he had also the best teacher of the time, Simón Rodriguez, who was really responsible for his radical ideas, and took him all around and showed him the ropes. And Bolivia, which we just saw some videos, named after Simón Bolívar.
So we do one more. Now's the time.
Sure, or we could do the. Either that or the other Bolivar one, whatever you prefer.
Oh, okay.
Maybe now's the time is a little more apropos.
Either one. There was a hotel that Thelonious Monk used to stay at in New York City called the Bolivar Hotel. And his friend, this German Baroness, Nika Königswater, who sort of was a patron of jazz arts and gave lots of money and automobiles to her favorite players, and provided a sanctuary kind of refuge for Monk during hard times, and and Charlie Parker died in her apartment. So she lived in this hotel called the Bolivar Hotel. So that's pretty tangential reference, but
and yet, it reflects, because we're talking about bringing from South America to Jackson, Mississippi. There's some sort of connection between the Bolivar and the Black America, which we're exploring here, maybe.
Yeah. It's one of the first jazz tunes I ever heard too. Yeah. It's called Bolivar Baluz R. 1, 2, 3. Wow.